So we're missing Phil and Mike.
Yep, that's correct.
Let's just give them another minute. Here's
We
Mike.
have still, yep, they're both
And
here, Mr. Chair.
oh, great. Okay. Thank you. With that, it's 5 o'clock, and I will call to order the November 18th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. We're meeting by Zoom, so all votes will be by roll call. And please take care to mute your microphone when not speaking and to direct all comments through the chair to identify yourself before speaking, please. Um, the meeting's being both audio and video recorded. Is there any questions or concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted unanimous consent. Are there any concerns with or questions on the minutes from October 14th? We'll also adopt those. And is there a motion to ratify the warrants of October 22nd and November 5th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Is there any public comment for items not otherwise on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1, and perhaps we could share that exhibit, please, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Again, it's always a pleasure to meet with you each month. And here we are again. Thank you. So going down the list of items on here that we have on the exhibit, the first one is with Island Kitchen, which is a license agreement for catering at the airport. Just a standard license agreement that we go into agreement with new businesses here at the airport. Second one is with, and that's for $1,500. I apologize. The second one is for Aero Specialties, Inc. This is an amendment to decrease the contract amount by $56,395. We had asked for one electric and one gas-powered GPU. Unfortunately, the airport does not have the capability to plug in the electric GPU at this time. And so it's best for us to proceed to get that secondary GPU as a diesel. So we're, instead of getting one electric, one diesel, they will be both diesel. And so that, of course, brought the contract amount down by roughly $57,000 or $56,300 as outlined. The third one is for Island Carpet. This is a contract for the removal and disposal of the existing carpet at the main terminal, specifically at the TSA checkpoint and passenger hold room areas for $45,705. The work is to be completed the first week in January, which will make the terminal area and the hold room area a lot more presentable. Moving on, the next one is for the Overhead Door Company. This is a contract to remove and install two new doors over at the snow removal equipment building over on 39 Bunker Road, and a new contract in the amount of $40,500. The next one is a contract with 1200 Aero Incorporated. This is a new program that would report APU usage runtime on the ramp. What this will do is effectively help us to track noise sensitive areas around the airport, but more importantly on the airport for aircraft that are running for longer than 15 minutes per our 15-minute APU program that we have instilled at the airport. Again, this is just a one-time program development in the amount of $49,000. Moving on, the next one is with McFarland Johnson, the task order for amendment for number 3 for PFAS services for the phase 3. This is the new contract amount in amount of $329,479. And that is what I have for all those. Any questions or comments on those before I ask for your vote?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Commissioners, are there any of these that you'd like to take out for discussion? We could probably stop sharing the screen. I can see everybody a little easier. Thank you. Mr. Levitt?
Couple of questions. On the GPUs, I know there was a rather long lead time on those. Has this pushed back the lead time by switching it over to another diesel unit?
That is a great question, Commissioner Levitt. No, it hasn't. We've actually already received one diesel unit that is on site. The second unit is scheduled to be here the first week in December.
Great. Okay. I don't know if anybody else has a question on this one before I move on to the next one I have questions on.
Any other
Um,
questions on the GPUs? No. Let's go to the next one.
on 1200 Aero, the way I read this contract, are they doing custom software development, or is this an off-the-shelf product?
No, that is correct. It would be custom software development.
Okay. How many other vendors were considered before you decided to contract with this vendor?
There were no other vendors that we had gone to, as this is aviation related, and would allow us to go into direct contract with 1200 Aero. I do believe we already have a contract in place with them, with 1200 Aero currently for other services. So
Um,
there wasn't any others, if that answers your question.
um, Not really. My concern is not with the contracting process as to whether or not under the procurement rules we need to do RFPs, et cetera. But I'm aware of some other vendors that offer a product which could be off the shelf. And I always get concerned when custom software development is being done. It never seems to come in under budget and always requires a significant amount of maintenance and upkeep once it's there. So I'm just wondering why other vendors weren't looked at, or were some looked at and then determined that they didn't have a suitable product.
That's a great question, Commissioner Levitt. If you feel best, I might suggest we curb this for maybe a future airport commission meeting and have us do some more diligence and looking to see if there are some that are on the shelf products that we could reach out to.
Okay, I would be fine with that. I'm happy to send over to you a couple of vendors that I'm aware of, but there are probably more out there.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
I'm okay with, if I just add on to that, we have sort of been looking, and we did do, I know I was involved with the meeting with that particular vendor that did a bit of a showcase of the product that they have. And one of the reasons I thought that this might be a good vendor to go with is because they already are established on the airport, and we're already using them, and they have the antenna. That being said, I wholeheartedly support, making sure we fully, investigate what our options are, and see if there is something that you're aware of that's more commercially available. Some of the basic looking around that I believe the previous manager had done, and I know that I have done, was there's a lot of flight tracking and not so much on the ground. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because I think that you're aware of some that do. So the idea was to try to determine when the individual aircraft essentially fire up and when they begin to move. So if there is something that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we might be able to make this work and perhaps save some money, I think that's a good idea. But let's see what else we can find out about this if everyone agrees. I'm happy to hold that. Is there any other questions on any of the other items?
Not for me.
So I would entertain a motion to approve the pending leases and contracts with the exception of, as listed on Exhibit A, with the exception of 1200 Aero.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Levitt,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you. This will take us on to our continued jet fuel discussion. Mr. Smith?
You bet. And at this time, I'm going to turn the time over to my assistant airport manager, Preston Harriman, who has kind of spearheaded this project and who can provide us with the most recent updates we have for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Chair. I believe we left it off. I think the commission wanted some staff recommendations on some items moving into next summer specifically, and then possibly some longer term items and discussions, such as possibly converting one of the second underground avgas tank to jet fuel. So I do have a little bit of information for everyone. I did sit down with staff to talk through the idea of leasing additional trucks. We would recommend 3 7,000-gallon trucks in additional to what we have. One other item to consider is we normally send back a jet truck right after Christmas stroll to save a little bit of lease money throughout the wintertime, and then we would get basically a brand new truck right before Daffodil weekend. And normally those are 5,000-gallon trucks. We've upped that to another 7,000-gallon truck. So that's an additional 2,000 gallons that we'll be able to have on hand. As far as parking, we looked at different locations throughout the general aviation ramp, over by the fuel farm, over by the ARF station, possibly staging one on the north ramp near the commercial ramp. We've got plenty of areas and ideas in mind where we wouldn't have to make any changes to airport security fencing or anything like that. And 3 is a good number for our ops team to handle as far as quality control checks and keeping those things up and running and in service. One possible issue would be adding 3 additional trucks could put a possible strain on our mechanic. We've got basically one in-house mechanic, and if for some reason that these trucks, or if we're having issues with the trucks, we would have to rely on World Fuel and sending a mechanic down to help us with any issues that they may have, or we would have to possibly look at a mobile mechanic that is here locally on the island to help with any major repairs that the in-house cannot do. We looked into our license or permit that we have to store jet fuel. This would not require any amendments to that. I talked to the fire prevention officer with the fire department, and just to confirm, there's no amendments needed for that license. We would basically make sure that we had storm drain covers, additional spill kits, and a couple additional wheeled fire extinguishers in the immediate area of where we did park these trucks. Any questions on the trucks before I move on to the underground storage tank?
Mr. Levitt?
You indicated that one truck is 5,000 and you're going to up it to 7,000. Are the remaining trucks all 7,000, or
No,
do we
currently
still left with 5s?
Yeah, currently all jet trucks are 5,000-gallon trucks. So the one that we're going to swap out, like we do every single year, we rotate them just to the salt air out here, really eats away at these trucks. We would normally get a 5,000-gallon truck in the spring. We're going to make that a 7,000-gallon truck.
Well, is there any reason that all the trucks shouldn't be 7,000 so that we pick up an extra 2,000 on each truck?
We've never had 7,000-gallon trucks. In the last 22 years, we've always had 5,000-gallon trucks. This will be the first 7K that I've ever had. If we like it, and it's a big truck. They are a lot bigger than the 7,000-gallon or than the 5,000-gallon trucks. If they work for us, meaning our tight spaces, the commercial ramp is super tight. Even the general aviation ramp is tight. Parking, if they work and we like them, then we can rotate them out when they're due and switch into 7,000 gallons.
But we'd of course lose the ability to use them next summer, right? We're back to availability of ferry space, or if you find in May or June they're working fine, do you have the option to up them to 7,000 before
Not at
the
that,
really
no.
busy season starts?
Not at that point. No, we'd be stuck with two 5,000s, and then if we do the additional 3, we could have, would be 4 7,000-gallon trucks, and then 2 5s.
So if you're going to get a 7 on Daffy weekend, or perhaps even sooner, are you able to put out cones or test drive them and see how they work and how difficult it might be to maneuver them?
Yeah, no, that's definitely in the works, because they're much larger trucks. It's going to take a little bit of extra driver training for the individuals that are operating these trucks. Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on the trucks? So, and then you have some more, Mr. Harmon, on the
Yeah, well, I guess
reservation.
one other quick item that I didn't mention is, of course, the lease is going to be, you know, more money because there are bigger trucks. So we'll have to negotiate that with World Fuel, of course.
Okay, if we could put that in motion.
Yeah, absolutely. I've already talked to Maria, yeah, and make sure everybody's on board with that.
Thank you.
Okay, so as far as converting a second underground avgas tank to jet fuel, I did get a price estimate from Trask Petroleum. It was just shy of $100,000 to convert that tank over. It would be basically, you know, new piping, new check valves, new ball valves, electrical work. We'd have to install new probes, new floats. We would also have to upgrade the Integra, which is basically the tank monitoring system, some V-Smart controls, and the new console that's in the FBO, because that is basically outdated and there's a newer version. So that price would include those upgrades. We would need to amend the storage license that we have. I think that would possibly require to go through the select board. I don't know if that would need to hit ATM or not. That's a conversation we can have later. We would need to notify Mass DEP, and we could do that through Bill Tabor, which is our LSP for VHB and is our AV operator for our underground storage tanks. We would have to decommission part of the avgas stage 1 vapor recovery system. That would also include in the price. So if we did do this, I would recommend that we would lease an additional avgas truck to help offset that capacity that we are losing, because we are selling more avgas. We sold more avgas this last summer than I think we've ever had. So I did talk to World Fuel about that, and they could we could lease I think 1,000-gallon truck, a 1,500-gallon truck, and possibly a 3,000-gallon truck. I would lean probably toward the 3,000-gallon truck just to ensure that we had the capacity that we wanted. So I would imagine that price, I don't know if that would require IFP or IFB or an RFP process.
And on that point, is this still get us into the age and the warranty issue?
Yeah, so I did double check with Bill Tabor on that. So right now, I believe the tanks are 26 years old. Once they do hit 30 years old, the warranty basically ends. And if anything happened to go wrong with those, we would be on the hook for that, say if they started leaking. As long as we do our annual inspections, there's annual inspections, and then there would be an every 3-year inspection. Mr. Tabor thinks that these tanks could last possibly another 10 to 20 years, as long as there's no hiccups within the system.
I'm not so sure the conversion sounds like the best idea, but I'm wondering, I mean, is it your recommendation to proceed with that? And what
I
about the option of, I think before we decide just on that, I think, additional alternatives, temporary farm is maybe one other potential option. And we're gonna, solve one problem and then have to start juggling other trucks around versus you're kind of
Right.
all set up with that avgas.
I don't know. I think $100,000 is quite a lot for a tank for the warranty that expires in 4 years. I think we're kind of taking a risk there in case something happens internally and we do have a leak, and then we would be required to pull those tanks out of the ground, at least the one tank out of the ground. I'm not 100% sure which way I would go on that. We did talk to Hadwin Fuller briefly about the possibility of a temporary fuel farm. We spoke about that in-house with our operations staff, and we would not recommend a temp farm just due to the logistics. Because we had one when we did the fuel farm rehab project 4 years ago. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of paperwork, and it was kind of a logistical nightmare. It worked and it got us through a pinch. I would not recommend it for this.
Okay, good to know. I mean, this is really what we're trying to do here is understand all of the alternatives. Mr. Marks?
Yeah, I think you're trading one problem for another by converting this tank. I mean, he's already said if we do this now, we're looking for another truck because we're really selling more avgas. I think we're just creating more problems by converting this tank. I think you should leave it alone. And because if the warranty's up in 4 years, we're going to have to make a decision whether to even, go in there and do some work to replace it or whatever. And I think that's going down the wrong road towards solving an avgas problem. I really think we need to look at more towards the farm side of things. And I also caution, and I agree with Preston on the size of these trucks. You go from a 5,000 gallon truck to two 7,000 gallon truck. That's a huge difference when you're on dual axle trucks and trying to manage them around those airplanes over there, especially when you're in the confined space of the FBO ramp over there, trying to move those trucks. I agree with him wholeheartedly that we need to get one of those trucks ahead of time and see if that's a feasible way to go if we want to stick with the 5,000s and just use the 7s as the storage.
Right. It seems like the fives, we shouldn't phase them out completely and use them for the manage that and run around the runabouts, if you will. Mr. Levitt?
The concern about when you're doing the conversion in the tanks that it gets near the end of the useful life. Is doing this conversion potentially going to do anything to the tanks that would shorten the lifespan on it?
I would think no.
So, I mean, we're 26 years into a 30-year warranty now, and doing the conversion is not going to change any of that.
I don't believe so. No.
Right. So the same risk that Phil was concerned about is we have one way or the other. Let me just throw out a couple of financial numbers to think about, because I'm very much focused on everything that we're able to do to sell more fuel, and I think there are some things that we can do with that we'll be discussing at future meetings. But 20,000 gallons of fuel that's holding, or even if it's 19 with the reserve, we're going to make about 80,000 in profit on that. So we just need to turn that tank 2 times and this all pays for itself. So it's sort of a no-brainer financially. Anything we can do to give us capacity to sell more fuel goes right to our bottom line. And once that cash is there, we know we've got lots of things that we want to do in both an operating and capital budget. So I think we should carefully look at the financial benefits that can be brought to the airport by having that additional fuel. And that really comes into this issue on supply capacity during the summer if we can't get any more trucks over on the ferry. What this would mean is that early in the season, when we can get trucks on, we can load up 20,000 gallons. And we have that there, and that's 20,000 gallons we can sell. And then whenever we can get more trucks on, we've got more places to put the fuel.
That's all. Oh, great. Do you want me to real quickly? We did have a conversation with Rob Randy from Steamship, Paul Bornament, and Nat Lowell from Island Energy. You want me to give a couple of bullet points on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
So Nat and Paul did a really good job at explaining to Warren and myself on how the steamship operates, how they work really closely with Noonan, and kind of how the limitations that they have. Currently, they have only 48 loads a week that they are basically splitting up between basically the airport, Island Energy Services, Sun Island, Harbor Fuel, Nantucket Energy. So those 48 loads have to be, split up amongst those companies and, their needs. They did talk about the newer boats. They currently hold 8 trucks, but there's a possibility of adding a 9th truck at least once a week. So that would be a benefit for that one truck going somewhere. They did mention that we could get a couple of those a week, which would be fantastic. They also talked about adding the holiday boats back on. So that potentially would help us, in the long run on the holidays. We could get 1 or 2 loads on those days. We did ask about Sunday boats. The answer was basically no. Traditionally, there's been no Sunday boats. Steamship uses this as kind of a cleanup day. So they don't offer the hazmat boat. So they could offer, I think standbys for vehicles and or grocery trucks, things of that nature that wouldn't be considered hazardous. They did talk about the relationship that they have with World Fuel / Ascent, and how that communication goes when we request additional reservations and or give up a reservation. Basically, they have a huge email chain that they email out to everyone saying, hey, this reservation has become available, basically who could use it before it is given back to the steamship and basically allowed to disappear. So that relationship is strong, and which is encouraging. And it was nice to be able to meet Rob Randy. I haven't met him before, so I think that meeting was an eye-opener. And Warren, if you want to add anything to that, feel free.
You definitely hit it right on the nail. It was good. It was also good for me as a newcomer to the island to get a better understanding of just the ferry in general for myself. So yeah, you got it, Preston. Thank you.
So that's great, and thank you for that. But are we going to get any extra loads? I say that in a,
Yeah.
I've had some conversations, with them as well, trying to advocate for the airport. And kind of get this exactly what you've heard. Everyone's trying, and it's a allocation issue, and that it's really about that communication. Um, but there's still reservations that get granted sort of from above, if you will. And I still wonder about that, is how do we, continue to try to, push that or advocate for ourselves to get that extra load.
So one good thing that I think that I really, when Nat Lowell was talking to us, he basically said, if you guys can, trend or, see how your levels are trending, he's like, shoot us an email and say, hey, we're looking low in a week. Then they can try to adjust things on possibly their end to help us, so we don't end up in that low inventory situation. And it's gonna, and I think we got to, play the game as well and help them in situations. As I remember, it was, I think, in July or August, one of the two. They did say, hey, our gasoline is running low, and we were able to give up one of our reservations to them because we were in a decent space at that time. So I think it's just communication is going to go a long way in that sense.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that uh, whether it's you and whoever else is in charge of that at the airport, understanding you're not there 24/7, or should you be, that we have that covered. There's a process on our side
Mhm.
that doesn't leave, that we also, in that if they've given us this avenue towards that, you might get a last minute, that the airport might get a call at any time that there's an availability. What is our intern? You don't have to get into all of it right now, but from what I'm hearing and synthesizing, how important it is that we have a procedure to sort of never miss that call and always fill that spot somehow within, the organization, and because it's I think that at 10,000 gallons, and if that was to happen a couple of times, it would make such a big difference. And if we were, to be sure that that is, codified, and it would just be my sense of things. I mean, I defer to you and Mr. Smith on the logistics of that, but
Absolutely.
so it feels like we've gone probably almost as far as we maybe can at this point there.
Yes, I believe so. And one last point is, once we do know what we've been granted, we will be sure to send that out to the commission. But normally that is not sent out until around Christmas time.
So that's, I mean, that the point here, I think, is that once that is set out, it's much more difficult to pull
Yep.
back and modify. And
Mhm.
that was kind of my point on this, is that if there's any way in advance of that final decision, I don't know the way. Um, and maybe that's through our, I know World Fuel still are the ones actually requesting that. Um, you know, if there's any, make sure that it's known, I suppose, that, we did have to place uplift restrictions. And so,
Yeah, they are fully are the steamship and Island Energy Services are well aware of our restrict or limitations that we did put in place last year. So they know that we want more, need more.
okay. Mr. Levitt?
Um, Preston, we did that chart showing the inventory and where those big dips were. Um, is it worth hauling that out and circulating it to them and showing them the data that we had from last year and saying, right in here, which was post Memorial Day or July 4th or whenever it was when it lined up on the calendar, that we run low, we had restrictions, and to Art's point about letting them know before the Christmas schedule comes out, if we know right now when we're going to run into trouble, maybe they can be granting us those extra shipments in those periods.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can circulate.
Thank you. And then on the tanks, I guess, so steamship, is there anything further? I'm not sure that we can do. It seems to me what I'm hearing for, final sort of discussion, is that you've got under you have at a staff level have a plan for the additional refuelers. And now it's a sort of a decision point for the maintenance of the avgas tank versus the conversion.
Correct.
Um, my sense from what I've heard and what it would take in the age and that we're trying these other things this year, that option doesn't go away if we don't do it. I know the tank gets another year older and maybe we lose, it makes less sense, but I wonder if, my thinking would be to maybe hold off on that, see how the refuelers work, see how our additional management of the fuel works, try to do everything else but that, and then have that as what we consider for next year. Um, if we're still finding, if we just aren't getting anywhere with this. But I take Mr. Levitt's point that that's fuel that you can help sustain the operation
Mhm.
by selling. Mr. Levitt,
Um,
you feel
well,
strongly.
I'm I'm obviously an advocate for it. Maybe we kick the decision to our next meeting, and between now and then, we could put together a few quick financial models showing what that conversion could potentially bring to the bottom line versus what it would cost.
I think that's fair. Anybody else thoughts on the conversion or take this up in December? Yeah, Mr. Buscarin.
Yeah, I kind of like what Phil had to say about it. I'm inclined not to convert the tank. Creates more problems, costs a lot of money. I'd rather take it slowly. And I'd also vote for one 7,000 gallon truck, not three.
I think that we could go both. My sense and what I'm hearing, and Ms. Plans would be interested in your take on that as well, is that it would be good to still gather those financials and understand where we may be going in the future with that, and then to you follow all the other paths and then sit tight perhaps on that unless it's just overwhelming, you know, that you based on that information. I mean, that might lead us back towards where this whole thing started as well as, do we really need a farm expansion or not? Or can we make this work with the capacity we have? So, I'm sort of somewhere in the middle on that. I'm caught. One of the worries I still do have is that if we only look at it from the money, the potential earnings side of things, there's the logistics of that we still sell avgas as well. And now you're trying to move, and that operation is kind of all set up versus starting to move that around. There's a value beyond just the money to that, I think, when it comes to the operation and the logistics and the work and the management of then going through that project, plus the changes, and then plus having to coordinate and handle the avgas side of things. I think the way Mr. Mark said it, we just want to be very careful that we didn't solve a problem and create a problem. Ms. Planzer, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Okay, so no, the conversion, that didn't sound like a good idea to do to me. But I like the idea of the trucks.
Okay. Well, maybe we still could also do some analysis as well to understand what that additional 10,000 gallons might, without going down a giant rabbit hole. I think it's still good information for us to have as, we're going to be managing this jet fuel and all of this whole situation. We're not just sort of done with, I think, once we make the decision. So put the other two things in motion and then check that out and carry on, if that makes sense.
Like that.
Anyone else have anything further on that? Yeah, Mr. Levitt.
The reason we're discussing having this additional storage, whether it's converting the tanks or expanding the farm and the fuelers is the barge limitations. And going back through my notes when we had discussed this a few meetings ago, we had talked about finding out what Robert B. Hour is doing with the old freight boats. They're supposed to be, rumors are they're going to be running some freight service, and also looking into the availability for barge charters, and understanding, do we have options other than steamship to bring fuel over? And if we do, even at higher cost, then additional storage becomes less of an issue if we can get more supply and we're not beholden to steamship for all of it. Have we had any discussions with Robert B. Hour as we had talked about having, or looking at barges?
To answer that, Mr. Levitt, no, I have not had a chance to reach out to him, but I definitely will, and we'll make sure we bring that up in our next discussion in December.
Have they actually been licensed? I'm not even sure that's I don't think that that's actually my sense. I could be wrong on that, but I'm not sure that they're, the steamship is a license granting authority, I think, as I understand it, for those operations. Last I knew, that was still under review. Again, I haven't attended any of those meetings, but I don't know that that's actually in happening yet.
Well, it seems that they would know, and if we don't talk to them, we're not going to
Yeah, fair enough.
hear where their head is at on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Mr. Marks?
So a couple things, and I don't know if this is the right time or place to ask the question, and definitely we can talk about later, but I just didn't know this whole field farm thing, the expansion. I feel like, I mean, I just listened to Preston talk about converting the tank, and I'm impressed with his knowledge of all that stuff and the workings of it. And I really feel strongly that I feel like we could tackle that project in-house, because I feel like the nuts and bolts of the tank farm, the knowledge that I could assist with that, that maybe we can do this for a lot less money than this $1.7 million that we were given as an estimate. Originally, I mean, we need a plan, obviously, and then from the plan we could develop and see. I mean, I just feel like it's, you got to dig a hole, right? You got to put some concrete around in a hole. You got to build some foundations, set some tanks, and then have somebody pipe them in. It's not rocket science. And I feel like we as the airport could save a lot of money if we take this project on. Maybe we do have to hire a manager to help, to assist Preston in this. But I feel like it's a very manageable project. It's not overly over the top complicated. We already know our foam system can handle it. And I just feel like before we start converting a tank that's 4 years to end of life, potentially end of life, I mean, realistically, we don't want to take on the liability of letting that tank go beyond that, in my opinion. But that's why they're ripping all the gas tanks out on the island right now. I feel like we could benefit from that in a much greater way and ultimately solve the problem permanently, because the boat situation doesn't look like it's ever going to get any better anytime soon. I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I don't think anybody disagrees with me on that one. And we can always rent a barge, by the way. That's always there. You can always do barges and bring trucks over that way, but I don't think it's smart perhaps to put a fuel trucks on the barge, but that'll be something the barge company would have to talk about. That's a huge cost to do that, by the way. It's like $15,000-$20,000 to bring the barge round trip. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense for hauling a fuel truck on it anyway. Anyway,
Phil, for $20,000, how many trucks is that?
Well, I don't know. It depends on the barge. We could ask the barge guys.
We could keep going if I could just, we could keep going. We had a lot of discussions about this last year, the year before. There's also only so many Jet A trucks available.
Right.
They can only use the tankers for that one product. And so, I mean, it's because I said that, like with that, let's just rent the whole barge, load it up. We'll throw the max on there and it's the economy. We'll fill our empty tank farm. And, it's just the logistics here. There is more to it. I think these are all good ideas and trying to find solutions, but there are, I'm not trying to hit put up roadblocks. I just want you to know, sort of as a commission and the public, that some of those things that there is more to it than that. I think if they started running the barge service and there was slots, if you would, and our fuel provider could, have that extra truck available and we could figure that out, that would be I think a good idea. But I think we're not that service isn't going to go into it, play for us. But if it was there, or making sure, to Mr. Levitt's point, I think is good, that we would be interested in expressing that interest to them as they're setting this up, I think that can't hurt at all. And then to your point, Mr. Marks, I think on the whole design of an expanded fuel farm and going down that, I think for right now, as I've heard and everything we're doing, the focus is not getting into the actual fuel farm expansion at this point and seeing what we can do. I'm not so sure we're not going to end up there at some point. But being that we can only take on so much, and we're trying these other, I don't know if they're going to be just stopgap measures if our fuel sales just continue to escalate, and we're going to need that. But I think for our short-term planning right now, I don't know that we need to jump into a fuel farm planning process unless everybody wants to. Mr. Levitt.
But again, going back, reviewing my notes from the last few meetings, when we were talking about expanding the fuel farm, we had various quotes that ranged from 1 million to 22 million. And I thought somebody was going to try and find out what those realistic numbers were, because that's much too wide a reasonable range. I like Phil's idea of we can do it for less, and there's certainly a lot of knowledge around this grid that I'm staring at of people that know how to do it. But it'd be nice to hear what a contractor would charge for it, because that range is just ridiculous.
Mr. Lasden, I see you're on here listening to all this.
Yes.
Do you have any, since the last meeting, any new information that has come to light? Any other projects? Any other reason to believe these numbers?
So we did hear from MassDOT. MassDOT Aviation had assisted Taunton Airport in building a fuel farm. And they had a single, I believe it was a 10,000 gallon tank installed at Taunton Airport. And the construction cost was $1.7 million.
And how does that scale?
So, and I had mentioned this early a couple times that typically the cost on Nantucket is about twice the cost on the mainland. There's no, fixed number, but that's typically what we see between the mainland and Nantucket.
So, it sounds like we have a bit of a plan with some of these things, and then we'll see what we continue to come up with, unless anyone wants to keep going on the topic. Okay, hearing not. Thank you all for your work on this and the report. I do think we're making progress, and it's appreciated. Moving on to the PFAS investigation update, Mr. Smith or Ms. Collins.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll turn the time over to Madison Collins, our environmental coordinator, for the update.
Thank you.
Right. I prepared a few slides to walk you through this. So I was gonna just share my screen. All right, so we did have a few PFAS updates. So recently they finished the extended addendum to the phase 2 CSA. So if you can recall from a few months ago, we had to do an extended addendum to the phase 2 CSA per Mass DEP. They wanted to we're basically in a conversation with them about where our disposal site boundary should be, and we think we're pretty much done with it, but Mass DEP wants more data on that, so that's what I'm going to be showing you now. So in summary, the argument we're making to Mass DEP is that we are not accountable to expanding the disposal site boundary to the west. Based off the groundwater flow direction and the fingerprinting that I'm going to show you, it's most likely that the plumes to the west are not due to our operations. Mass DEP is still reviewing the airport's documentation, including this extended addendum to the Phase 2 CSA. So to get into the data, first, what we have here is the groundwater flow directions and the monitoring wells. So the blue if you can you see my cursor? Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, we can see
we
it.
can hear you.
Hello, I just make sure you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear us?
You're good, Madison.
Oh, here. I'm not able to hear you guys right now. All right, you can hear me? All right, thank you. All right. So going back to here, these are more monitoring wells, and each of these monitoring wells, they're relatively new. I think they were put in this past summer. And what you're seeing here is the flow direction is going towards the southeast. So that's what this contour is showing here. So what they did with each of these monitoring wells is that they now have these really precise measurements on different PFAS signatures for them. So each of these nonagons, or these kind of like spider graphs, are showing different concentrations of different PFAS chemicals. So each tip of the nonagon here, say take Act 24, represents a different compound of PFAS. So like this one is PFOS, this one is PFBS, etc. And so as you go from the center of the nonagon outward, that is showing how you have a different, showing how you're growing in the concentration of that chemical, of that PFAS compound in nanograms per liter. So for this one, say Act 24, PFHS, that one has a very high concentration of that compound, of that chemical, relative to the other ones that have none. So that's basically the overall gist of what you're seeing with these different shapes. And if the shapes are more similar to each other, then that's more likely that that PFAS signature came from a similar source. And if they're different, that means they came from different sources. That's more likely that they came from different sources. So the ones that we're most interested in when it comes to trying to decide where our disposal site boundaries should begin and end are Act 25, Act 26, and Act 27. So as you can see, Act 25 and Act 26 are pretty similar. They both have a high concentration of PFHS and then a medium concentration of PFOA. But if we compare that to Act 27, we see that that's a completely different shape and configuration. So we're seeing that there's a high concentration there of PFOS and then PFOA. And so because that's different and it's up gradient, we can say that that is most very, very highly unlikely because of activities in our operations. So that's that. So yeah, is there any questions on any of these nonograms or any of this more technical information? And we have one more thing to get through.
I mean, it seems to me that you're sharing the screen of me.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. Oh, if you go back to your diagram.
Oh, yeah. you obviously will want to see that.
So I think we could go, really into the weeds on this, and I guess it would take a different expert to look at this, but I spent some time looking at it, trying to with an analytical mind, and I mean, I I see a lot of similarity on all the ones. They're all pointed on to the, say, um, like your 9 o'clock position and I don't know. I guess I'm not seeing it the same way as you. I see the one you're relying on Act 27, but then you go up to Pine Tree and that's on the other side, and then you got I don't know. I don't see how this is conclusive. I really don't. And we got no testing, on the other side of the road. If we're trying to make a case for a boundary and they're saying it's not, I don't know. I'd be interested in Jim's take on this as well. I guess they're saying the same thing, but I'm no expert. I'm just looking at the same graphs and what you just explained to me. I guess I just don't see. I see a whole lot of them that look similar, loaded up, if you will, on that, towards that same PFH X5. So anyway, more to come, I guess, and we'll see what DEP says, but and I don't know if we're gonna do additional testing, and I know I saw that we had a bit rather, large contract with McFarland that we just approved for the next phase, and I don't know if that's gonna, include some more testing here. But I want to make sure we get it, that we get that right.
All right.
Um,
Yeah, I can definitely bring that up to Jim and Michael Canaric from our Weston team. One thing I did ask them, because I was definitely like trying to understand if we have like say a specific fingerprint based off these nanograms that that's like says like yeah, this is like basically what we're seeing overall at ACK. And so one thing that was interesting that they did mention is that because we have had like a long history of AFFF, um, it's that we might have different types of AFFF that's been used throughout the history of its testing at the airport. And so because there's different manufacturers who might make the chemical in a slightly different way, that there's no like one specific thing that is going to be like, yeah, this is what our signature always will look like. And so like when you're zooming into a very small area like this, they are looking for trends in one area versus another one. But yeah, if we can definitely but to go back to your comment, we can definitely get Michael and Jim into the conversation more.
and I mean, we had test results on the other side of the road, which is why there was hits and they had the boundary, um, moved based on the discussion with DP. But was that testing not the fingerprinting? Is that the difference there? Was that simply a magnitude of concentration? Or do you have this same information for those wells
I'm sorry, which wells do you mean?
on the north side of Airport Road, so over into say the Daisy Way neighborhood?
So that okay, I'm honestly not sure exactly which wells you're talking about
Like the
right now because
neighborhood
I'm
on the
not familiar with
opposite
Daisy Way.
side,
Right.
neighborhood on the opposite side of the gas station.
Okay. So those ones, what I remember is that they have different. They overall got the plumes of them, but I'm not sure if they match the signatures on those. But we can ask Michael and Jim on that.
All right, thank you.
All right. And then the last thing I wanted to report out to you is the other things that's going on related to PFAS is that fuel farm samples for the hydrothermal alkaline treatment, the HALT technology, were recently taken in late October. Were from the containment area under the jet fuel, and then 2 are from the containment area under the loading dock.
Thank
And
you.
that is all from me.
Any water connections done? I didn't think I saw any in that report in the chart.
No, but I can chime in there through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we do have some updates with some of the houses, or I should say with the remaining houses that need to be hooked up. The status is for that for 21 Monahanset, that should be completed now. For 83 Skyline, we are waiting for the plumber to make the connection inside that home. And then, of course, once that's done, the project will be complete. The next 2 is at 30 MVR, Matacashan Valley Road, and 44 MVR. Those quotes have both been received. We're just waiting for the work to be done. And then the last 3 is at 90 Skyline, 1 Nobodier Way, and 6 Evergreen Way, where the contractor is still generating those quotes. So we seem to be progressing nicely with these remaining homes. I guess that hopes is to try to get these ones done, if not by the end of the year, by early next in the winter season. So
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the PFAS update? Okay. Thank you both for that information. That will take us on to the crew quarters project, Mr. Smith.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, for the discussion with the SW Cole, from our previous discussion last month regarding this contract, there's actually been some additional emails from the previous airport manager in the former OPM of this project that my staff have come across that could potentially shed some more light on this issue at hand. With those emails, as I'm trying to analyze them, I just found those out just a couple of days ago. I personally feel that we should curb this discussion for the next 3 weeks to see if there's any more light on this on the best path forward for this contract. So I'd like to move that one just for another 3 more weeks, see what comes about of that, and then we can definitely go for a vote for that.
Okay, anybody have any objection further on that? Mr. Marks?
Yeah, just we had asked for when we committed to developing the basement.
Oh, if I could hold you on 1 second, Mr. Marks. That's the
Oh,
next
wrong
item.
subject.
This one is
Sorry.
strictly SW Cole is the materials testing, and we
Oh.
had the not to exceed contract that they build over, and we're trying to resolve that one. So we'll get to your point is the next one. So is everyone okay with letting Mr. Smith work with council and seeing what we can determine for a recommendation from staff and information on that one contract? Okay. So now, Pearl, construction change order number 6, Mr. Smith.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so from my recent conversations and of course correspondence with the commissioners, again, I'm asking for that approval of the change order number 6 as compromised and outlined in the last airport commission meeting we had in October, that we would pay for the disconnect and the retaining wall through council. The issue of construction seems to be getting mixed and confused with the design aspect of the building, as the change order directly relates to the construction piece. And so the build out of the basement seems to be a design issue and should be directly dealt with between the architect and the airport and not with Pearl Construction. So that's what I leave there, is just really for a vote to approve of this compromise that Pearl has brought forth to get this resolved.
Mr. Marks.
Yeah, I think we asked in the previous meeting as to what was supposed to be provided with respect to the electrical system in the building. We were always intending to build out the basement, and we were supposed to provide the electrical system, even though we're not going to build it out at this time. So we could do that, if I'm not mistaken, which is why we put a 600 amp panel in there. And the way I understand it, based on the information that I have, is that we only put a 400 amp service in there. So now we'd have to go back in there, rip that service out, and put a 600 amp service in the building. That's my concern here with paying them for this change order, with putting in a disconnect in the building. So I'd like to understand if we actually, what the specifications were given to them and how it was supposed to be built, because I'm fearful that we're paying for something, this disconnect, that we shouldn't be paying for, because it should have been a 600 amp service, which we should have been consulted on, and that's how we would have done it. I'm sure we would have done this. We would not be wanting to go back and have to rip the service out to pull a new service in. And if they have a 600 amp service in there, they wouldn't need the disconnect. That's what my concern is and remains.
Mr. Levitt.
Um, I know I've been pretty harsh on these guys and the way they did it, but the way I believe that I understand it, the way that Warren has explained it to us, is the architect, in my mind, did a faulty design. The OPM, who was supposed to be overseeing the architect, didn't catch it. Instructions were given to the construction firm, who did what they were told to do. So the problems seem to be upstream of the construction company. And if the construction company provided the service that they were told to provide, I'm not sure we should be holding them liable. But whatever additional costs we incur, we should be holding the architect and or the OPM liable for that cost. And I'm not sure that the contractor needs to be getting squeezed in here unless somebody can tell me that the contractor was supposed to be making these decisions and pushing back on the architect.
The one
And
answer that I haven't got is, did the plan show a 600 amp service or a 400 amp service from the road?
Right.
Mr. Cormier, can you help me with that?
No, it showed 400 because that's what was in the original design by the engineer. My information was that the building decision not to go forward with the basement design stopped all work in regards to any engineering for the basement work. So the original intent was not to have the basement as an additional space, but only storage. That was my understanding from conversation. I'm not sure because I wasn't involved. I'm just hearing it from the architect that there is no design for a basement dwelling unit, and the only design is based on what's there today. So the electrical inspector got wind of a possible rumor that the basement would be possibly designed for additional dwelling units, and he pushed for this change to be made so that it wouldn't have to be changed later. But again, because it's not designed, we cannot accurately say that this service that's in there currently will work in the final state because there is no engineering for it.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I mean, I've been through a bit of this, and I really think that there was a huge mess up here in that all along all the commission's discussion was that the basement would be prepped to be built out, and whether there was a mistake or a loss in translation, I don't know the answer to that. But and whether one of us or somebody, the OPM was supposed to catch that that wasn't going to be adequate. I'm not sure where we're going to get going around on that. But to me, what bothers me so much is that, well, if we weren't going to build it out, why we spend all the money on the retaining wall? Why did we make that area so that it would be decent living space? We wouldn't have done all of that. So we did half of it, but then not this other piece. And same with the window egress well. Commission didn't decide there was no discussion of, that would be removed. All of our intent was that the cost was too high to do the whole thing, and that's why we were going to put plumbing under the slab. That's why we were going to put the retaining walls in. We were going to have it ready for when we had more money, funds to come in and do that. And this got, I think messed up at the same time. I don't think that we can hold Pearl, the construction company, any further on that, because they followed the plan. And, I guess somewhere along the airport side, we should have realized, I would have hoped that we wouldn't have had to sort of dig through a whole set of construction plans to figure that out. But I guess, I don't know, that it wasn't fully designed to that point. So, Mr. Buscarin.
Sounds to me like this was not clear. In a construction project, if you have a contract and it's clear in the contract, we wanted a 600 amp service, we have something to talk about. it sounds to me that it's not clear. Therefore, we have nothing to talk about.
You are good at just that. Yes, Mr. Buscarin, I agree with you there. Is there anything further on the one point for the Pearl change order number 6? Mr. Levitt.
Can I just circle back to Phil's insightful question, which was, did the plan that Pearl built out say 400 amp or 600 amp? And I think that's really what the question is. If it said 400 and that's what they put in, they should get paid. If it says 600 though, and they put in 400, then we have something to discuss.
Yeah, there's no dispute that Pearl put in and did the work associated with the original contract documents. The change was mandated by the AHJ, the electrical inspector, to install the 600 amp service in order to get final C of O. So Pearl did as contracted per the contract documents. And they
So-
responded to the change request to up the service.
To clarify, I think we're saying the same thing, but you're saying the plan showed a 400 amp service, and then the add-on in the change order was a 600 amp disconnect to prevent that panel being used with the 400 amp service. Do I understand that correctly?
My understanding is that the change out was done because of a rumor of expansion in the project.
Well, I don't know
The
about,
only thing the AHJ had for comment, and they worked with the engineer on the project to come to a compromise to satisfy
But-
the AHJ.
but see, I think as
But
I
there's no
read
design.
everything I read, but the panel that was put in would have accommodated it shows you where there was bits and pieces of this, if I'm understanding right, that and that that was the issue, is that couldn't be then just used because the service was inadequate. But the point as we go around and around on this is, of course, I haven't seen it on a plan. I've asked several times, but if your ROPM, if I find it later and it's different, then that would be a different issue. But no one seems to be able to actually give me a plan that shows 400 amp service on it, but that's what got put in. But that doesn't mean it's not buried in a specification somewhere, which is what you're saying. And I believe it likely is, because that's what Pearl put in. I don't think they would have decided as a contractor to put in a smaller service than what was specified.
That is correct. They don't have the authority to do so.
Yeah, Mr.
They're not
Marks.
designing it. They
All right,
are
so-
bound
understand.
by
So
specs.
what we're saying is that we specified a 400 amp service, but somehow we decided to put a 600 amp panel in the basement, which then caused us to have to add the disconnect. Is that what we're saying? Or are we saying that the wiring inspector, because this was the way I heard it from the wiring inspectors, the 600 amp panel was put in the basement and they wanted to turn the breaker down, but he wouldn't
Right.
accept that, and he required that the 400 amp disconnect be put installed. So how did the 600 amp panel get put in the building? Was that
Yeah, that-
mandated by the
That's my
electrical
point. We got this like hybrid design where like half the basement was going to be, three-quarters of it was good to build it out, but then the other piece isn't, because there was a stop work of some sort on a design, and what we said was to have it prepped. But again, I think that's not what we're going to work out here on this change order for the contractor. To Mr. Buscarin's point, I think we have to move on this one and then decide if we want to do something. Well, I think we're going to take other action related to the design or whatnot. That's going to have to be a separate topic for the commission.
If I may. I think we've asked for some very simple documentation to explain so that we feel comfortable that we're paying for something that, right, we should have to pay for. And I feel like, I don't think that's a big ask. Why can't we asked for this for like 3 months ago when this first came up, about saying, where's the documentation? Who approved the 600 amp panel? And is it a 400 amp on the design? Why? I don't understand why that's so big deal to have somebody produce for us. I just don't, I'm sorry. I have a problem with that.
Mr. Cormier, do you have that information?
I've asked those same questions to the design team, the engineer, and the contractor, and They don't answer me. I've asked them numerous times for this. Warren's been involved with these
Well,
communications.
Mr. Marks has a good point. You know, I mean, they're telling us this, but they're not backing it up. I mean, it shouldn't be that. I mean, they should be able to go to the contract documents and go to page 3-7 or whatever it might be and highlight where it is and just put an end to this. So I guess if they want to get paid, I mean, that's sort of what I'm hearing from the commission. I don't know, that they'll produce that. I mean, there's all this back and forth, all these emails, all this description, but nothing is actually here is the here's the specification that said that a 400 amp service will be put in and not a 600 amp. Like whose plan was that on? I think that's the question. And I do see the point. If we don't get to the bottom of it now, there'll be no design, there's no
So the bid set main distribution panel board was an 800 amp.
okay. So why wouldn't an 800 amp service be put in? We're not gonna just buy a bigger panel. I think we got to do it to be continued.
So it was the electrical
scary.
circuit conductor upgrade. It was the conductors themselves. It had nothing to do with the disconnect or switches. It was the conductors.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Buscarin?
Why don't we ask the architect from whom the plans should come whether what his specification was on the amperage?
I think that's what Mr. Cormier was saying. I thought we had too. That's sort of there has been some emails that I know that I've seen but they don't answer the question. What I see is, I saw was something that said that the commission decided to get rid of a window, an egress well, which of course I don't ever remember. You guys, does anyone else in the commission? We never had that discussion that we were going to eliminate the egress well. We never would have agreed to it. All of us are completely, it was the opposite. So, all right, I think, I think that they've got to provide us.
So the original documents asked for 350 MCM cable. The electrical inspector said he wanted 600 MCM cable. That is the difference in this change order. It's to upgrade the cabling coming from the transformer into the building so it can support the 800 amp service.
So is that done?
The work currently completed per the change order is a 600 MCM cable, and that's what the change order is for. It has nothing to do with panel boards. It has to do with the service, the cabling coming into the building from the transformer. So from the secondary side of the transformer into the building is now a 600 MCM cable. The original cable was 350 MCM per the bid documents. So this is a cable upgrade.
Okay.
That's what's on the change order.
And now the question is, will that support the development of the basement?
I cannot answer that. I am not an electrical engineer, and neither, when I asked Ethan, the architect, he did not have an answer for that because they said it's not designed. It would have to go through engineering.
So if you had a 600 amp, so now we have a 600 amp service in the ground. Is that
You have an
you're
800
absolutely
amp, 800 amp panel in the building.
800 amp panel with a 600 amp service?
A 600 MCM cable.
I think we got to continue this. I think you guys got to get us this like solid. Come in here and, this is getting just so frustrating. Seriously. Like if they want the money, you got to answer the questions. They got to answer the questions.
Who's going to answer this? That's the question.
Yeah.
Because it's not the contractor. The contractor was directed to put in a 350 MCM cable per the contract. The contractor installed the 600 MCM per the requirements and the request of the building inspector. So the contractor did extra work to satisfy the AHJ's recommendation along with the engineer and architect's directive to do that work in order to achieve the CO.
So to Mr. Karen's earlier point, it's really a design
It's
issue.
absolutely a designer. It's a design issue, and it goes back to, you know, why did the engineers agree to this upgrade request with the AHJ and not dispute it?
Right.
But the direction was to increase the cabling to get the C of O and satisfy the AHJ's expectations.
Commissioners, you want
Hmm.
to approve this change order? And Mr. Smith, the magnitude of the cost that we're approving?
It's $32,905.78 as we had compromised to split it right down the middle.
Is there a motion to approve, or Mr. Marks?
Make a motion to approve, provided that they give us that documentation that appears he's looking at on his screen somewhere. Just send us the documentation so we know there's there's 800 amp service.
Yeah, Mr. Cormier, if you could just highlight that and send it.
It's a simple request. That's all we've ever asked for, right? It's a simple documentation and we'll pay the bill. That's what we want. And yeah, okay, I get it. It was 400, now it's
Who
800.
would like the information? Because I sent it to Mr. Smith previously.
If you could just make sure we know what page it is on. You're already there. Maybe just a quick follow-up email, Mr. Cormier, to Mr. Smith. This could be found here and here. Quick summary of what was previous sent, because I understand he probably sent the whole set of bid package, and he's running an airport as well. So we're relying also on you as our OPM, and we'd appreciate that. So there's a motion on the table. Is that something that you think you could do for us, Mr. Cormier?
I'm doing it as we speak.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Sure thing.
The motion on the table, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Sue Scarin?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. That moves on to the terminal optimization project.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As of right now, there's no update on the notice of funding opportunity for the last airport terminal project due to the government shutdown. However, my most recent correspondence from AAAE, who is our kind of lobbyist with the FAA, this past week is that they do believe that NOFO, as they call it, notice of funding opportunity, should hit the streets now that the government shutdown is over. So we're just waiting to see that. I do have McFarland Johnson. They are currently building the scopes for both the geothermal and the terminal optimization projects, and they should hopefully have those completed by the end of this week. I'll turn the time over to Mr. Lasn if he has anything to add to that.
Thank you. So just a general question, and I guess it's been talked about a lot about, do we have a terminal project and a separate geothermal project? Do we combine them together? And I just wanted to bring it to the discussion of the commission. We can develop the scopes either way. If you're going to do the terminal anyway, then it's much more economical for you to do them together. Because if you do them separately, there's separate professional services, there's separate construction services, there's separate contractors to be hired, and it's all very similar work that would be done in the terminal. And it would just be much more advantageous for you to do them as a single project. But I understand if you're unsure of moving the terminal ahead or not, the need to have the geothermal done. So I'm just looking for some thoughts from the commission.
We have staff recommendation here.
Yeah, my recommendation is what Mr. Lazen has said. I think it would be smart to have them together to cut those costs, and bring those costs down.
And I guess if I can just say, the terminal piece of it, I understand is a discussion you're having because if the NOFO doesn't come out or if you are not successful with the NOFO, are you still interested in doing the project? And I guess that's where you're sort of deciding on to do them together or not.
Is that something we can decide once we find out about that? I mean, do we have to know that now? I guess I'm
So
not
it's just a
clear.
matter of how I put the scope together. Do I add all the geothermal work into the terminal scope? Or do I keep them as two separate scopes of work?
Oh, I would think we would keep them at two scopes just in case.
Okay,
Is that, because we might not be able to tackle it all.
okay.
Does that make sense to everybody? We're gonna have to figure out where we're at financially as we move forward too on something like this. Even though it might cost a little bit more, if it meant that something could get done versus all of it. Now I understand better. And that was you were saying we could save a little bit, but I think
You'd
that
save money on both design services and construction cost from the contractor if you did it all as one project. Because
but the cost is going to be so much higher, and if we don't get the funding,
Sure.
can we break it out later if we found out what. In other words, you'd have done all that work, you scope it all out as one project, we find out we don't get it, and then you do a revised scope that basically eliminates the stuff that we wouldn't be able to fund.
or if you are successful in both, you're just going to have two contracts building at the same time potentially for two different
Yeah, but
contractors.
from a strategic point of view, if we're seeking that funding, is it better to have it consolidated, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter. The
It's only a
FAA,
grant for a project and a number.
and it's a grant for a project, and the FAA completely understands that terminals are a proportion of eligible versus a proportion of ineligible. So they do that all the times with terminals. I believe
I would
when you
think we
build,
would break them.
right, it's two separate projects.
Well,
Okay.
I see what everybody else thinks. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it gives us the maximum flexibility in the event and the current situation if we don't get the grant funding. How does everybody else feel? Mr. Buscarin?
What are the costs for these two programs? Is there a guesstimate? We turned down this huge $50 million renovation of the terminal because we don't get any money at all for the airport commission or for the airport by fixing up the terminal. I'm very concerned about spending a lot of money and getting no income from it. So, we have a lot of expenses coming down the road, the runway, the fence. Those things are the runway we're going to have to fix. Fixing up the terminal, my view is could be a huge lift, and we don't get any income out of it. So I'd like to know how big is the red box here?
Bill Hasden?
So we are carrying in the CIP, I believe we're carrying $17 million for the terminal, I believe is the number we've carried. We haven't done a whole lot of engineering. That was based on some very, very preliminary sketching and discussions over the last couple of years. And I believe the geothermal is, I could look it up, but I believe it's a couple $1 million for the geothermal. It was on the last CIP.
And that was to add the filter type system.
Correct. And the
Just so we're
building.
clear. And that's why I feel like we
Yep.
break it out,
Yep.
because if we're going to have to do that, and the other thing about that one scope is that it may be something that we find in our, if there's ever some cost recovery through the PFAS, situation, then we can directly attribute that to that bucket. So I think there's a benefit to doing it that way for that purpose as well.
Okay.
We would have to break it out anyway. It would probably be harder if it was wrapped into that other project, and then we were going to seek as some part of our reimbursement under whether there's a settlement or however that might work out, which we're not giving up on.
Okay.
Does it make sense to everyone? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Piscarin.
You know, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot out of a PFAS settlement out of these plaintiff attorneys. I have
Well, we
no
don't want to go
faith
too
that
much into that, right? I mean,
we would be counting any of that money. So, even though we are supposed to be primary, or at least being at the head of the line, we haven't heard anything in months. So, I don't think we have $17 million to put into the terminal. I really don't.
well, that's why we're after the grant opportunity.
Yeah. I think the federal government is dead bang broke.
We could let's hope let's put
Running
on
the
some,
FAA, I would say,
my rosy glasses and hope that maybe we can, we are Nantucket. So, all right. So does everybody agree we'll do this as two contract, two task orders? All right. Is that what you needed, Mr. Lasden?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Um, Mr. Smith, rates and charges.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the rates and charges, we are going to be proposing to be scheduled for January 13th AirCom or Airport Commission meeting. Currently, my staff is working on a red line item list of the rates and charges, which once that is compiled, we will be meeting with the commission to present those changes, and then of course have that. Maybe my staff might help explain it better because this is my first time going through this. But then we will have it for open public comment for the rates and charges that we are proposing for the upcoming year. So maybe did I say that right?
Yeah, I think what we're gonna do is this was essentially an announcement. Let the public
Yeah.
and all the commission know we're working on this. It's what we've been doing every year. And at the December meeting, hopefully we'll have an initial draft of where the staff and you're going with this. Commission can provide feedback for that draft, which would then ultimately be what would be published for the public hearing. And then as a result of the public hearing, things may change there based on input from the public and from commissioners, and hopefully adopted that night with those changes, or continued for deliberation to the February or special meeting if needed. Nothing is completely set. So that's the typical process, that just to let everyone know.
Thank you.
And with that, if no one has anything further on it, we'll look forward to that for our December meeting for the initial draft. And then the first quarter report. I
Yes,
don't think we have to go into too much depth on this.
Sure, yeah. For the sake of time, let me just hit the main highlights from that report that was shared in the packet. Regarding airport revenues, airport revenue collected in the first quarter totaled $19,515,005, representing an increase of 2.9 million, roughly 2.9 million, or 18%. Compared to the same quarter last fiscal year. The primary driver, of course, was the quarter-over-quarter increase with fuel sales revenue. The fuel revolver has a current spending limit of $6 million for this fiscal year. Last year, the initial limit was also $6 million, but was later increased to $8.5 million. Resetting the fuel revolver in quarter 2 or 3 will be necessary to ensure sufficient funding are available for fuel purchases, which we will discuss in the next part of this meeting. Overall, just total fuel sales revenue for quarter 1 increased by $2.5 million compared to the same period last year. Fee income and FBO revenue rose by $153,000 and $176,000 respectively. Same with vehicle revenue increased 19%. However, interest on investments decreased by $114,000 compared to quarter 1 of FY25. Total revenue, including other financing sources, ended the quarter at 94% of the annual budget amount. Just moving on to expenses, the operating expenses, including debt service, totaled roughly $8.1 million for the quarter, which was an increase of 11% compared to the first quarter. This increase was primarily driven by higher fuel revolver expenditures resulting from increased fuel purchases. During that quarter, airport sold roughly $240,000 more Jet A and $19,000 more 100 low lead in the same period last year. Salaries and Medicare increased, which was to be expected. And medical insurance in Barnstable County and retirement expenses also increased, which is typical. Administrative expenses were down. Compared to quarter one, FBO and operations expenses were down 11%, and repairs and maintenance rose by 65%. This was primarily due to some more airfield maintenance projects that we've got and the purchasing of tools, particularly in painting, that our staff have been doing around the terminal with some of the trim as well as the FBO building, which I did want to give them a great shout out. They have been painting in our offices this last week, and it looks very, very nicely done. So shout out to the team and their hard work for that. Overall operating expenses are up 11% compared to the same period last year and amounted to 42% of the annual budget. I don't really think I need to go any deeper into this packet unless anybody has any questions that they want to review.
Any questions? No. Fuel revolver increase.
Yeah, perfect. So I do have a quick presentation. Billy, if you don't mind, are you able to share that first? That'd be great. Yeah. So how it works is the airport has a fuel revolver. The airport, of course, sells aviation fuel and implemented through this revolving fund. Separately, it accounts for specific revenues that fluctuate with demand and allows for continuous replenishment of the funds. This requires our airport to accurately predict fuel cost and demand roughly 15 months in advance. As I had mentioned previously in that quarter one report, the original cap was $6 million, and I am looking to seek the approval to increase that by $2.5 million to an $8.5 million value. Next slide, please. So, of course, all airports rely on fuel sales as the primary revenue source. The FY24 operating budget was $2 million, FY25 is $2.2 million, and FY26 is $2.45, or 80% budgeted revenue. Additional revenue above budget and fuel revolver funds are used to pay down and off our bans and our debts, and provide savings for future capital projects. For instance, we have a runway 624 shift and rehabilitation, included in that also the additional revenue that we receive from that. We have been using toward our PFAS mitigation. Currently, the airport has spent over $10 million in PFAS mitigation that has been funded by the stewardship of that revolver. Next slide. Of course, some of the myths that people have is that the airport really wants to sell more fuel. In all reality, fuel supply is already constrained, as we have discussed previously in this meeting with our jet fuel discussion. The other myth is there are more private jets, so fuel sales must be up. That's actually not true. There are the same number of jets, but they fly further. As I reported in our final annual report of the last year, for the last 6 to 7 years, overall operations and employments actually have gone down. This last year was the first time that they've actually increased by 0.6%. So no, there's not more private jets coming. It's just the planes are getting bigger and they're taking on more fuel. Another myth is high fuel prices cause high ticket prices. That's actually not necessarily true, as fuel is discounted for our year-round providers. Another myth is JetBlue takes on a lot of fuel because they are our largest commercial carrier here at Nantucket, and actually on an aircraft basis, it's American Airlines who actually takes on more fuel, just due to their operations, with JetBlue coming in fully loaded and not needing as much fuel when they leave. Next slide, please. Statistics prior to COVID, Nantucket sold 1.3 million gallons of Jet A annually. Post-COVID, that has gone up to 2.1 million gallons annually. And a staggering fact, since 1998, Nantucket has sold roughly 30 million gallons, or 29 million gallons of aviation fuel to be exact. The commercial side of the house only takes 30%, and the bread and butter is really the general aviation that we get in our summer season. Of course, here's just some more statistics on the anticipated fuel purchases that we have until the end of fiscal year. We are projected to have anticipated fuel purchases of roughly $2.7 million, or roughly 133 loads. And it's for that reason, of course, to date, we've already purchased $5.5 million or $5.5 million worth of fuel purchases. And as I just showed in that previous slide, we're anticipated another 2.7 million, which brings our total to 8.3 million. Hence the need to increase the fuel revolver from 6 million to 8.5 million. It does leave us with about $160,000 worth of contingencies, potential additional deliveries and price increases. Again, kind of these numbers just pretty much what I just said in the last email. Even after the fuel revolver increase, the revenue that we would get would still exceed our budgeted amount for FY26. As you can see, the current FY26 from 6 plus 2.4 million from the operation budget is 8.4. With the increase, we're still on top, well over what we would have budgeted for. And of course, what will we do with the excess fund balances? Pay off the projects we took through Capcom and FinCom in the 2026 cycle, build cash reserves for future capital project needs, contribute to employee stabilization fund to assist in helping our staff here and keeping our staff at Nantucket, and of course to pay for any for continual future PFAS investigation and remediation. So with that being said, that's the end of my presentation. This presentation, I guess that I do ask for the commission to vote for the increased fuel revolver. Once that is done, we will take this to the finance committee for their approval of the increase of the fuel revolver, and then subsequently to the select board for their approval.
Any questions? Nope. I don't think you need a motion on this. I
think I do. According to Maria, we do.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, please, we do need a motion for this.
Okay. Is there a motion to increase the fuel revolver spending limit to was it 8.5 or was it 8?
8.5 million.
$8.5 million.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And thank you all for that. Mr. Smith, the manager's report, please.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick on the AIP projects in relation to the concrete hard stands. The previous airport manager had submitted a capital article without sufficient funding amounts in that warrant. As the airport will not be receiving a grant for this, supplemental request was submitted for FY27 capital. And of course, due to this snafu, the hard stand 2 Alpha will be the one being constructed this coming spring, with gate 1 to be completed in spring of 2028 upon approval of that supplemental request. The airport has been working with the airlines to adjust the parking for the upcoming year, and all the airlines have agreed to shift the gate 7 maintenance kind of holdover gate to gate 1. This will definitely put a lot less stress on gate 1, which kind of buys us that extra year to be able to at least get gate 2 Alpha completed with that hard stand this coming spring. With the high mast lights, Kobo is proposing a lighting control system that runs off a cell signal, but we might have some concerns with that signal interfering with other systems currently in place, such as wireless security cameras. Our IT representative, Skylar, he is going to reach out to McFarland Johnson to review some of those specs before we make that official decision on the system. A worst case scenario, they would all be hardwired back to a central location at the ARF station terminal or both. The system as proposed has the capability to turn on and turn off, dim, and group them any way we want to have it configured. In relation to the DBE, AC DBE update, on October 3rd, the Department of Transportation published an interim final rule regarding updates to the disadvantaged business enterprises, or airport concession disadvantaged business enterprises, as they're called, effective immediately. That rule eliminates race and sex-based presumptions in the program, a key principle for determining whether the individuals who own and control a firm are considered disadvantaged, and whether the firm qualifies as a DBE or AC DBE. And it requires all firms to be reevaluated by Mass DOT as quickly and as practical as possible, and that no new contract goals would be allowed until that has been done. Currently, all of the goals have been set to 0 until further notice, and we have been working with legal counsel to provide sufficient language for future RFPs that would reflect this new ruling, with language should that ruling be overturned and require goals to be reestablished. So more to come on that. For the non-AIP projects, the sound wall barrier, we are still anticipating a schedule imminently from Premier Fence to start with. We got the shop drawings; those have been reviewed by MJ, and it's just now waiting for a schedule from them. Tenant alterations. Airport Gas has completed their swap out of their tanks at the airport gas station here on Airport Road. There was a successful walk around there. Everything looks to be in order and as according to the TAA as outlined. We do have another tenant, Jeff Smith, who has submitted a TAA for a new concrete pouring for 2 new pads that will accommodate the new storage facilities that he is going to be putting in at 33 Bunker Road. In relation to the RFP bid status, the boarding ramp bid docs were issued yesterday and are due by 2 p.m. on December 8th. And then for the flat roof building, the RFP documents were reviewed by council and are back in airport management's hands for review. The plan is to issue them by December 15th is the hope. And with that being said, Tradewind, that's currently operating out of there, has informed airport management that they intend to continue service through the winter. They had requested the RFP to kind of be pushed up to this fall. However, due to the unforeseen circumstances that we've had with trying to get these prepared in a timely manner, what we're going to do is we're going to seek input from legal to allow Tradewind to continue operating on a month-to-month basis until the RFP is finalized, completed, and then a decision's made. So when we anticipate that those changes to be made, we'll bring that to the commission, hopefully by the next commission meeting, to allow for this month-to-month until the RFP is done. Operations update. JetBlue is our last seasonal air carrier. They finished service on October 20th. With that being said, all commercial service is done, leaving Cape Air as our sole commercial air service. JSX has sought interest in providing Part 380 charter service into Nantucket next summer. Airport management is working on the logistics and the pro forma on how to accommodate their operation. There's 2 options. One is to have them operate out of the terminal. Another option would be if that flat roof building were, once that RFP is out, for them to bid on that, and should they subsequently win such said award, then they could potentially operate out of there. Another topic that's come about is grass landing operations. There's been a discussion between the FAA and airport management. This would accommodate pretty much only tail dragging aircraft that really perform better on grass airstrips. The airport management, we're working with legal counsel to draft such language that would allow these landings to happen here at Nantucket. Another thing to bring up to the commission is in relation to the small airport letter of intent. So the airport has a major runway project, as you know, are well aware, in the near future to shift into rehab runway 624. The airport, we have continued to explore the possibilities of funding sources for such a massive project. One such source that has become potentially available is the small letter of intent program. Initially, this program was designed only for large hub airports. However, the FAA has expanded this possibility for funding for small, non-hub, non-primary airports. And what it does is it allows for the use of certain entitlement funding along with encumbering discretionary future funding within the region for an extended period of time as negotiated with the FAA. And so the airport, we will be meeting with the FAA next week to discuss further this option, which seems to be a reasonable option as been brought to my attention since I started here at the airport, as these discussions have been happening with the former previous airport managers. All right, with TSA, there are 2 new CAT machines that were approved and are en route to the airport. Installation is scheduled in the first week of December. And of course, subsequent training of TSA staff on those machines will occur during the off season, so they are ready for full functionality and operations in the next summer season. We had our FAA required snow and ice control meeting this past week with all airport stakeholders for the upcoming winter season. The seasonal tent has come down for the winter, which is great to see. But however, the framework stays up throughout the winter season. Updates to IT, our ARF modem was replaced today, which caused a brief internet loss to the FBO terminal and FBO and Munis users. I do think that it was only just a 20-minute loss. However, TSA was informed, as a lot of their systems are run on the internet, and we didn't have any hiccups there. Regarding the government shutdown, as you're well aware, the shutdown is officially over. There were some flight disruptions with Cape Air due to the 40 major airports that were required by the FAA to reduce 10% of flights. As of Sunday, all restrictions have been lifted and there are no more potential disruptions that we foresee here at Nantucket. And with that, that's all I have. I could run through the statistics. I defer that to you.
I think we got them in the packet.
You bet.
Unless
Thank you so
anyone wants
much.
anything specific.
Yeah, that everything, nothing stands out
Thank
in
you.
relation to those. You bet.
Does anybody have any questions on the manager's report? Still have it.
Can you just go back on the project updates? You were talking about the hard stands, and one of them you're not able to do because the funding request wasn't made. Can you just tell us how many funds we're talking about, and if you had the funds, would you be doing both of them?
Yeah, so the initial ask to the town was for $500,000. I do believe that was 2 years ago. Maybe Miss Basheva might be able to dawn some light on when that was. However, the total overall project is now $1.3 million. And for that reason, we're going to need to ask for an additional supplemental worth of $900,000 to accommodate all that. However, we would like to get Spot 2 Alpha done this coming spring, as it accommodates for the larger aircraft, the Airbus 220 that JetBlue is flying, as well as the potential increase in an upgauge of fleet of the A319 of American Airlines, which they are claiming may come into the airport. With that being said, Spot 2 Alpha needs the work done now. It really is the spot that's of more concern, because right now, currently, the A220 straddles concrete versus non-concrete. And so with that being said, and due to the powers that be, with the way that the municipal law works in those funding requests, we can only really work with the 500,000 right now. And so we're working with MJ to develop a scope that would pay for that 500,000 for that concrete stand 2 Alpha to get done now. And then, of course, with the supplemental, we'll continue on and do gate 1 in spring of 2028. Hopefully that makes sense.
But if it wasn't for the municipal contracting regulations from an operational basis, you'd like to have the 1.3 million and do them both now before next summer?
That is correct, yes. And unfortunately, we were kind of holding out on potential grant funding from the Department of Transportation, Mass DOT. They gave us the hard news just a couple weeks ago in our CIP discussion with them that all departments in the state of Massachusetts took a 10% cut due to budgetary restraints, and that they informed us that we would not be receiving a grant for that. There is a House rule petition that can be used here with the town if a grant is in hand that would allow us to continue on with the project, even though the costs have ballooned. But unfortunately, we were not able to receive a grant. We cannot utilize that. And so that's kind of what we're in with this situation.
So where I was going with this, when I looked at last year's budget, we apparently spent about $3 million out of the operating funds to buy a house for the airport manager, which is really a capital expense. And that was done because we got the finance committee to approve it, and we had plenty of free cash in the operating funds. So if that maneuver worked last year, why couldn't that maneuver be used again to take the operating cash upon approval of the finance committee and use it to build these hard stands, which it sounds like we need now?
Mr. Levitt,
Yes.
through chair, through you, to answer Mr. Levitt's question.
Yes.
So what we need to follow here, and it's very important, it's the total appropriation at town meeting. Every single project it's approved at town meeting with specific reason, and we have to spend out those money out of this project. We have to follow the language in the warrant and things like that. So the issue here was originally there were $500,000 requested for that specific project, the hard stands. And that was approved at last town meeting. So as of right now, we have asked Capital Program Committee for supplemental funding of $900,000. So if that gets approved by Capital Program Committee, then it needs to go again at town meeting floor. And After the approval at town meeting, we could do the other hard stands next fall. So it will be a fiscal 27 project, not 28 project. And again, we could use town meeting and cap and Article 3 to transfer money into that article. But the most important here is we cannot pass that total appropriation of that project. And it currently right now is just $500,000.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to understand, and maybe it was explained to me wrong because I couldn't wrap my head around why we had a $3 million capital expenditure in the operating budget. And I was told that because of the way the capital approvals were done and basically took a year or two in advance, that there was a way to run it through the operating budget last year, which is how we were able to purchase that house.
Mr.
So
Levitt,
did I understand that wrong?
you, because of timing, so there are two differences here. The first difference is that we did not have an original capital article for with any appropriation regarding purchasing a house. So that's why we use the operating budget to do that. In this case, now we already have an existing article. So what we're looking for is to increase that article. And technically, yes, you could transfer some money into the operating budget, but again, you need annual town meeting for it. And since we already have a capital article for this purpose, what we're gonna do is just use a different article at town meeting and increase that particular article that is specifically for the hard stands. So we wouldn't use our operating budget. It wouldn't. It's just a different situation. The house was kind of last minute spring idea, and again, we did not have a capital article for that. The proper way to do this was maybe the year before that, submit the capital article in front of capital program committee again and go through the process. But in both cases, everything happens at town meeting. And we need to wait for that. So it doesn't matter if we transfer money into our operating budget or we increase an existing capital project, it's still everything is going to be effective July 1st next year.
Does that make sense?
No, but
Well, maybe we take that offline.
but we could be here all night, right?
Yeah, we get the municipal finance. I know what she's saying, and but let's
So, Mr. Chair,
it's a cumbersome process with having town meeting once a year. I mean, that's what we just keep getting back to. Yes, Mr. Lasden.
so I just wanted to sort of a couple things. The CapCon requests, we have to develop sometimes a year before. So Maria, when do you need the CapCon requests? 6 months before town meeting or something like that?
It's more.
Now.
Yeah.
Actually,
No.
our deadline was August to submit our capital progress, and town meeting is usually in May.
So we try to work with your staff to come up with the CapCon requests specific to the hard stands. The one that we're talking about for $500,000 was for a single hard stand. The project on the table was for 3 hard stands. So that's why the price increased so much, because the project changed. And as the manager pointed out, when it's a grant project, we the commission have more flexibility on changing the projects. But specifically to a project that you're working on now, the apron lighting project, when we put the CapCon project together, there were 10 lights that were going to be replaced. When we had the scoping meeting with the FAA, they doubled the project and said do all 20 lights. So that became another dilemma for Maria and her team. And it happens somewhat regularly as the projects evolved and the need to develop the capital request forms so much earlier in the process.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lasden. And I think we can. Are you satisfied for now, Mr. Levitt?
I don't want to take up any more time of the commission
please.
tonight.
Yeah, we can. Thank you. We can continue on that maybe offline to sort of work through. I have found this process frustrating over the years, but I also understand that that's municipal operations. With that, was there any other questions on the manager's report? Are there any commissioners' comments? Mr. Harmon.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, real quick. Did anybody have any comments or questions? Warren had mentioned the unpaved operations here at the airport. I just wanted to answer
The
any-
grass landings.
Yes, yes.
Any questions or concerns?
I'm
No,
just
it's-
curious where they would be.
We've identified about 3 different spots on the airfield, and nothing has been finalized yet. We're still in kind of the asking questions stage with FAA and Natural Heritage on where they can go and if this could even happen at all. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you. Please fully scope that. I mean, it came up in our TAC meeting. So we definitely have multiple regulatory environments to navigate here and make sure that everything is fully approved and covered. And
understood. Thank
keep
you.
us posted. Thank you.
Yes.
No commissioners' comments? Anything? Nope. Anybody from the public on?
No public comments.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
aye.
Mr. Biscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all. Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hey, have a
Happy
good evening.
Thanksgiving.